Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this session entitled Reshaping Food Systems for Sustainability. It's really a critical topic at a pivotal time in our history. As those of you in this room probably know, because you've selected to be in this room, we are facing really dual crises to both human health and planetary health. And these crises are largely driven by the way we grow, raise, cultivate, ship, refrigerate, and eat our food. In Milken style, I'm going to share a few statistics because we're seeing today three concurrent epidemics related to food. The first is undernutrition, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we still have far too many people around this globe that are still facing hunger and food insecurity. The UN places that number somewhere between 800 million and 1 billion humans. Second, we have skyrocketing rates of diet-related chronic disease. That means obesity, cancer, heart disease, diabetes. Around the world, we're seeing these rates soar. In most parts of the globe, they're now surpassing tobacco as a leading cause of death. And Asia is no exception. I just read yesterday that in China, the rates of chronic disease have increased 9-fold in one generation. I even get goosebumps when I say it because it's so hard to believe that in one generation you could see that sort of health outcome change. And the third, after undernutrition and our skyrocketing rates of chronic disease, is this epidemic, this crisis we're seeing for our environment and concerns about climate change. We now know that one of the leading causes of greenhouse gas emissions globally, about 30%, is attributed to agriculture, and half of that is attributed to livestock. We also know that by 2050, we're predicted to have 9 billion people on this planet. And how in the heck are we going to feed 9 billion people, which will take 60% more food than we grow today, when we're already struggling to feed the folks we have on the planet already? So, big issues, but there are a lot of opportunities to address these issues and a lot of great work that's already being done. And we have a really esteemed panel representing diverse parts of the food space and diverse perspectives. So here on the far end, we have Simon Loudon, President Global Foods PepsiCo. Then next to Simon is Matilda Ho, Founding and Managing Director of Bits and Bytes. Next to Matilda is Timothy Childs, Founder and CEO of Treasure 8. And here I have the pleasure of sitting next to Heston Blumenthal, the founder of the Fat Duck. The full bios, of course, for all of our speakers are available to all of you in the audience, but I do, and I'm not going to read them all, but I would love to go through and just go down the line and give each of you 90 seconds to, in your own words, talk about your work in this space. Simon, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. Morning, everyone. So I guess I'm the big food company. I've been at PepsiCo for 23 years, so I've certainly seen my fair share of the evolution we're having to go through as a business. And I'm really happy to be here for one major reason, and that's that you seldom have the opportunity to marry what you do for your day job with a personal intent, personal interest. And whilst I run the PepsiCo Foods business, which means I'm responsible for growing the business as quickly and as fast as possible, my other half of my life is to understand how we can do it in a more sustainable fashion. So I hope that by the end of this session, you'll get a sense of what PepsiCo is trying to do to further the agenda. So thanks for your time.
Great. Matilda?
Hello, my name is Matilda. I'm the founder and managing director of Bits and Bytes. And our goal is to shape the future of good food by investing in startups and technology that can address systematic challenges in the food system. And that challenges include food security, safety, nutrition, sustainable protein, and waste reduction. And this is under the belief back in 2016 when we started in Shanghai is that the global food system is broken and is in dire need for disruption. And we need to change the way that consumers eat and how we can empower consumers to eat better, cleaner, and more mindfully. We have invested in 14 different companies so far. We're globally, but our goal is to help to bring those solutions, no matter it's outside of China or inside of China, to really commercialize and help them scale up the opportunities for Chinese market.
Great. All right, Timothy?
Hi, I'm Timothy Childs. I'm the founder and co-CEO of Treasure 8. A lot of people want to know what Treasure 8 is. I'll explain it pretty quickly as I can. So think about us as a circular economy platform play. We're systems designers, and we're a tech company that's taking on evolving the entire food system. Our main purpose for being is to deploy nutrition for humanity. And we do that by looking at these giant mounds, leftover organic food remnants or leftovers from post-production waste and infield waste streams. So we look at those giant mounds that normally be rotting or go to pig farms or something like that. We see that as a viable resource, a very important resource. So we look at those piles as ways we can valorize the materials out of that.
All right, we're going to dig into it more.
Okay.
Okay, Heston?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Heston Blumenthal. I'm a chef. Well, a chef is actually part of who I am. I've become something else. I'm not sure exactly what it is yet, but that's a work in progress. For the last 25 years, I've been fascinated and worked very hard on the effect of our senses and our memory, stroke emotion, and how it's involved with our relationship with what we eat. Human beings became the most powerful species on the planet because they could imagine things that didn't exist. So that imagination allowed the species, sapiens sapiens, to create shared beliefs. So a language is a shared belief, religion is a shared belief. Cultures, states, nations, music, cooking, these are all shared beliefs. They didn't exist before human beings. The two most powerful shared beliefs of all are money and time. And most people don't realize that time is a human invention, the linearity of time. And time and money have become the two most powerful drivers. And I think part of what I'm coming at it from two directions. One is the food that we cultivate, grow, harvest, process, prepare and eat. And the other side is how we eat that food. So the relationship we have with that food, the most intimate relationship a human being has is with themselves and the breath. The next is what we put in our mouths, what we drink and what we eat. We eat the planet. Otherwise we wouldn't grow older or grow up, get bigger. I will shut up.
It's hard, right? 90 seconds, it's really hard.
So I'm looking at that, structuring water, and the effects of the microbes.
Okay, these are amazing teasers. I think it's like now everybody has to stay in your seats so we can hear the rest of this. But I'm going to go back to you, Simon, because you are the big food guy in the room. You represent PepsiCo, one of our largest multinational food, and I'm explaining PepsiCo as if anybody needs to know what PepsiCo is. Largest multinational food and beverage companies. Does PepsiCo recognize the need for a healthier and more sustainable way to feed the world?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we do. And I do think there's been and I'd like to think in some ways I represent the industry, not just PepsiCo.
Okay.
I think, and I'm sure there's some people in the room here that were yesterday from Danone, Nestle, etc. And we're all growing up, and recognizing that, well, number one, we're here for the business for the long term, and if that's the case, then we better take responsibility for what's happening. So what are we doing about that? I was talking to Heston outside about if the big guys don't move, it's hard to shape, right? So I think we have a responsibility as one of the big guys to shape for the future. And we have an absolute belief that given our scale and our stature, the fact we buy 1 billion tons of crops every year, potatoes, oranges, oats, etc., produce a lot of beverages. I won't tell you how many packages because it will just freak everybody in the room out. We have to take responsibility for the world's food system. And we do it fundamentally in 4 ways. Or we're starting to do it in 4 ways. And before that, I should say that historically, it's been led by sustainability experts in PepsiCo. And great, right? But we need to have people running it that know how the business works, because this needs to be a P&L responsibility and accountability for our GN. So we do it in 4 ways. The first way we do it is we think about agricultural systems. We have a sustained farming program. We try and impact upwards of 40 to 50,000 farmers. We have test farms across most of Asia. And what we're trying to do there is inform, educate, ensure that we're building sustainable farming systems and certifiable agricultural crops from that system. So that's the first thing we do. Second thing we do is we look at water, and we're all familiar with the water challenges across the world. So the first thing we're doing is making sure that We're providing clean, safe water to upwards of 25 million additional people over the next 5 years. Just to give you a context, last year we did 7 million, so we're well on way to that journey. The second thing is to make sure water we use, we give back to the environment, so, which is slightly tougher when you think of what goes into a bottle, etc., but we're well on our way to that journey as well. Third is on our portfolio of products, and there's been much said about the role of sugar, saturated fat, and salt. Our fastest growing beverages right now are water. 45% of our portfolio is less than 40 calories per serving now, which is about a 30, 40, 50% reduction per beverage. Our fastest growing snacks brands are things like Bear, Off the Eaten Path, baked products, which are again reducing sodium and sat fat. And lastly, packaging, which are the scary BBC documentary images. And that's important because actually until China closed its doors, which we will look back on and think it's the best thing that could have happened to us, honestly, to stimulate change. You know, I will say the numbers now. We produce 40, 50 billion packs of chips a year, and we produce 60 billion bottles of beverages a year. And we're not, and our shares are not dominant, okay? So if you can imagine that's us, the industry is times 5 of all those numbers. We have to do something about that around recyclability, and we have declared over the last few days we intend to reduce our virgin plastic usage by 35%. That's 2.5 million metric tons a year, cumulatively over the next few years. That's a big deal. We're investing in bioplastic development. Recycling is a challenge in 2 regards. You better tell me when I stop, right?
Yeah.
The first regard is many markets will not allow recycled plastic to be used in their food and beverage products, and we're sitting in the epicenter of that. Singapore, Thailand, India, China. If you have a chance to make an impact, help us. Without that help, we can't do anything. We're leaning in with PPGA and government officials. We need governments to move from a you can't use to you can use. And the second thing is collection. Less than 10% of plastic bottles are collected around the world today. I'll tell you, we just set up an EPR system, which is a producer responsibility system in India. We're now collecting in Maharashtra, around Mumbai and around Delhi, 100% of the bottles we produce, we collect back. If we can do that without support from recycling infrastructure, then imagine what we can do if municipalities lean in and invest in infrastructure. That's where the system needs help. So they're the 4 pillars: water, agriculture, plastics, and products. Underpinned, of course, by a fundamental belief that we have to play our role in climatic control and climatic change. That's my 3-minute sustainability agenda on PepsiCo.
And it's fascinating because when you just set out those 2 challenges to the room around plastics, they feed one another. So if we're not recycling enough, is there enough supply of recycled PET for you to then use, even if these governments start to approve it?
You can't do one without the other.
Right.
Okay? So, and actually, we're part of many partnerships because what you realize with packaging is that it's an end-to-end challenge. I live in the US and I have 1 trash can. My mum, who's 80, lives in Suffolk in England. She has 4. If she puts something in the wrong bin, she gets fined. So my 80-year-old mother gets fined. If I put something in the wrong bin in America, oh, hey-ho, what, you know. So there's an education piece that we need to dramatically support. There's then an infrastructure of collection. There's an infrastructure of recycling, and then there's an enablement of us to use recycled plastic. We can use, if I get more recycled plastic, I'll use it. I just can't get hold of it. The stock is not available. Yeah.
And so just to restate, earlier this week, PepsiCo announced that you would reduce plastic use by 35%.
The virgin plastic use.
Virgin plastic use. Yeah. There we go. By 2025. I was going to ask you how it's going to be possible, but it's because of the recycled.
It's two ways. I think one is the recycled, and the second is thinking about packaging considerations. So the most recyclable product probably is aluminium cans. I mean, there's an industry there. There's a finance system there. Glass, returnable glass. Anything that's returnable is good. One way is bad, I think, is probably another rule we live by. So when you step back and look at the climatic impact, we're keen to do 2 things. 1, circular economy on plastics. 2, how can we move our business more proactively from plastic into cans and glass? And you may have read in the US, we're moving many of our water businesses not only to recycle plastic, but where we can, into can only. And that's a big step forward for the business, for the industry.
Great. And because Simon just mentioned circular economy, one of your favorite topics and concepts, and is talking a lot about packaging waste, I would love for you to share more about what Treasure 8 is doing, which my understanding is that you're addressing food waste, but you don't use those words. You use the term resource revolution. Can you say more about that?
Would you like me to talk about the circular systems or?
I think a little bit deeper of an understanding of what Treasure 8 is
Sure.
and what you're setting out to do and what this resource revolution is all about.
Sure. So super quick, we look at these giant mounds of food waste or food resource, and we build these circular systems we look at it as an energy system, basically. The food is an energy. And we take this unused energy and we point it towards people and pets. We also take some of that waste and actually use that to run the drying systems themselves. We have another circular loop inside of that, but then we also use those drying systems to output biochar for the soils.
Say what biochar is
Okay,
for people
so
who might not know.
it's carbonized organic matter. So you take food waste, you put it into this rotary gasifier, it makes the heat and the gas to run the drying systems, right? A regenerative loop. We can also provide excess heat back to the suppliers.
And why is biochar so important?
Biochar is one of the best. Thank you. Thanks for the lead in. This is sweet. So
You're deep in it, so I'm going to bring it up.
really, literally, more ways than one. We're actually in it together now. Biochar is one of the best ways to rebuild soils. We have 40 cycles left of soil crop rotations. So if we actually use the biochar and inoculate it with beneficial microbes, just like the gut microbes, not the same but different, just like the soil health, it's the fastest way to help rebuild soils, and you save 30 to 40% of water usage.
Yeah.
So that's a regenerative system. And then the resource revolution is that right now, I've been doing this for many, many years quietly. A lot of people talked about, they hated the word food waste in the beginning, but now Rockefeller's adopted, so now it's the thing. However, it's really a negative connotation. The energy is a downward waste, right? It's like downwards, they want to use it. So we're trying to reshape thinking, right? We're trying to reshape thinking to think about more towards the positive and realize, like, big giant mounds of gold sitting there. And just how can we really take those and turn those into value, right? So that's a recovery. So there's a revolution that we want to be part of and help really reframe the conversation and make it about looking at it instead of waste, but there's value in it.
Can you give us a sense of the size of this opportunity? We have not yet shared the statistics around food waste either.
So food waste, just super quick, it's the second and third largest emitter of methane, which is a lot worse than greenhouse gases of CO2. It takes $4.2 trillion gallons of water used. It's the largest thing in landfill. It's just bad. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to take that $2.7 trillion a year crisis with people that there's not enough food and there's too much food waste. We're trying to take that crisis and turn it into an opportunity for ourselves and our investors in the world. So it's $2.7 trillion annually just in the upcycle potential alone.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I mean, the estimates are that we're wasting 30 to 40% of the food that we grow. That's a humongous number, particularly at the outset. We talked about how many people don't have enough food. So as we struggle to figure out how to grow more food, maybe the intention needs to be placed back on saving more of the food that we're already growing.
And it's not just food, it's the nutrition.
Right.
So there's plenty of calories out there, but there's a lot of folks that have lack of good nutrition in the foods that they eat. So it's not just food, it's better nutrition in the food.
Yeah. And so you've recently become public about what Treasure 8 is doing. So you're a part of this exciting startup ecosystem in food and food tech. And there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of capital flowing into this space, and there are a lot of misconceptions. What's one of the biggest challenges for Treasure 8 at this moment?
Great. It is really frothy out there. So our biggest challenges are we're from 5 to 3, and one of them is the organizational, the mid to low level managers, and some of the organizations work with the incentivizations aren't aligned. But that's the other one is access to machinery being built on a timely basis. We're working on acquisitions, all that. And the third one for us is capital. One of the reasons we're here is we're opening our doors open for a Series B raise that we're doing right now, and looking for strategic partners to help build this resource revolution. But the main scale limiter for us is capital at this point.
Great. All right, Matilda, you're in this, what Timothy calls frothy space. One of the first and maybe only food tech focused venture capital firms in China. Can you talk to us a little bit about what inspired you to launch Bits and Bytes and what you're focused on?
Yeah. I think many of the startups are looking at China as a greenfield to scale up and commercialize their technologies. But if we look at where the money currently goes into, out of the $5.8 billion that goes into the food and agri investment activities back in 2018, more than 80% of the capital actually go into the downstream. And we're talking about e-commerce, meal delivery, restaurant chains, and you see startups collaborating with Ele.me so that they can ship the Starbucks coffee within 15 minutes to your doorstep. You're looking at KFC that are using facial recognition to do the mobile payment. And then so retail tech, we believe that it will continue to dominate and shine in the downstream world, especially in China, because it gives a perfect application landfill to scale up your AI technology. Not to mention, due to the openness of the AI-friendly government environment and also the abundant consumer behavior data inputs, we're going to see more and more of those autonomous AI that apply into the food and retail space. However, on the flip side, from our investment point of view, this is going to be very, very dangerous and not sustainable. Why? Because even if you create millions and billions of consumer touchpoints for hyper convenience, without the disruption in the food production in the upstream and midstream, it's not going to be sustainable. And we see that for the growing threat of the trade war and the African swine flu situation, that also signal a greater urgency for self-sufficiency of the animal protein. So that really translates into our strategy by really looking at, for example, innovation in the feed to increase the feed-to-food ratio, or even some of the farm management software technology that can bring data science or automation into the agriculture world. I like to say that in China and Asia, we don't necessarily need super fancy disruptive technology that probably need to take another decade. We need some low tech, but amazing execution team that can quickly roll out to our farming situation. So that's something that I see is the biggest opportunity and also the challenges that we're facing.
And so are you looking mostly at tech and innovations and startups that are coming from China, or are you looking around the globe for innovation you can bring into China?
Yeah, we do look at companies at the global scale, but their technology and solution need to have the commercialization opportunities for China. Okay. So specifically for AI application, we do have a strong preference over Chinese-based founding teams because they came from the food industry and retail industry. They know how to apply those technology to meet with a very unique and distinct retail landscape. Whereas when we were talking about biotech or even the waste reduction, sustainable packaging, we then strongly prefer to look at companies outside of China at the moment, where they're using the biochemistry and material engineering. And then when they have a pretty much established platform technology there, then it will be much easier for us to help them to overcome the entry barrier to Chinese market and help them to quickly grow and connect with the strategic partners.
So I think it's cruel when venture capitalists are asked to talk about their favorite company. It's like asking you to pick your favorite child. But what general area of innovation are you seeing that's exciting you most these days?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I think there's no single silver bullets. But if I have to pick one, I probably would go with biotech. So we have a company in cellular agriculture called Future Meat Technology based in Jerusalem. And so for people who are not aware of the cellular agriculture here, it's basically taking the stem cell from the animal and directly feed the serum in a bioreactor. So you'll be able to grow the animal meat without slaughtering or raising any animals. So imagine 10 years from now when you eat a chicken nugget from McDonald's, most of the chicken fat or the chicken content might directly come from the bioreactor. And for us, this is really fundamentally changing how we're going to feed the world for the animal protein with a very strong sustainable mindset. So we're happily connecting them with even some of the SOE company in China to start thinking about how we are going to regulate, how China FDA is going to regulate when cellular ag is ready for the market in a couple of years.
Heston, I'd love to fold you in here. You've been a world-class chef for 25-ish years. And so you're perhaps closest to the consumer. Do you think do you expect consumer acceptance of, let's start with this cellular ag, lab-grown meat, there are different words for it.
Good question. I think that what human beings have been incredibly successful at doing, as I mentioned before, we created shared beliefs. Time and language, money, for example. Mm-hmm. So we have become we've become more powerful than ever before as a species, as a whole, but we become individually weaker. And we have tried to kill our shadow. So antibiotics, we fine it, we put it in prison, we judge it. We live in a more judgmental society than we've ever lived in before. Now, if I say to you, you say, don't think of a pink elephant, too late. It's probably got a tutu on it. The more you try and stop yourself from doing something, it's the way our part of our brain works. The more somebody points a finger, you feel you're having a finger pointed at you, the less likely it is going to work. So what we have to do, we are storytellers, and this is one of the beautiful things about human beings, is imagining things that don't exist. So if we tell a story around something, I went to India the other few months ago, did a dinner, went to the Taj Mahal, amazing piece of architecture, but there's other amazing pieces of architecture in the world. But the guide told us a story, and it was this incredible love story. I'd never heard the story before. The Taj Mahal became something so much more magical just because it was wrapped around a story. So I think that all of these things it's the way they're told. If they can be done without judgment, what's happened is we have moved into an area where we've gone from being human beings. So think human being imagination, human doing production, manufacturing. Without imagination, we wouldn't have all the incredible things that we have. We wouldn't have biotech. We wouldn't have the knowledge to do what you're doing with the soil, which I think is fantastic, on the way. We wouldn't have that knowledge. So we need to look at education. I've rewritten with Oxford and Cambridge the GCSE for food and nutrition. I did it 2 years ago. It's a work in progress. Now, there's an author called Yuval Harari who wrote a book called Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind. And in the front of the book, he says, 13.8 billion years ago, space, matter, or mass, and time combined, Big Bang. That's physics. Atoms and molecules were produced as a result. That's chemistry. Some of those atoms and molecules formed organisms. That's biology. Some of those organisms formed cultures. That's history. Now, food, cooking and eating, bits and bytes, is the only subject that every single subject can come underneath. At the moment, we are still controlled by an education system that was invented in the Victorian Empire, where maths and English are the two most important subjects. Now, yes, it's important to be able to spell, and yes, it's important to be able to do basic maths. But we've invented machines to do this for us. It makes no logic. Einstein said, why would you bother to learn something you can look up? And so with the involvement, I've just gone onto the board of an AI company, new AI company, and my point was I want to use robots to do the things that robots can do. Not for the main purpose of making money, but to show what robots cannot do. And there's so many things that AI is nowhere near getting to solve. So if you can do that, we can do things to generate and demonstrate the beauty of human beings. So if you can educate children in the kitchen to work together as a team, the phrase a leap of faith, we have become so scared of not feeling worthy of belonging in a group, so scared of rejection, so scared of what could happen to us. We are carrying the diseases, the biggest issues. We talk about malnutrition, but suicide rates are rocketing, loneliness is rocketing, Alzheimer's is rocketing, dementia is rocketing, type 2 diabetes is rocketing, Parkinson's is rocketing. All the diseases are moving up the body, and it's all coming from the gut completely. So I'll shut up in a second. So the educational side is incredibly important, but to work together. When we were hunter-gatherers, we worked together to keep each other alive through food. Imagine you find a mushroom in a forest. You only value your breath when you're losing it. You only value water when you're so thirsty. You only value food when you're starving. You pick a mushroom up. Well, someone's going to have a go first. So there's a leap of faith. That creates a bond. We have more connections than we've ever had in the history of this species. However, we are less connected, and we need to be more connected. And this also comes back to microbes and activating the structure of water, plasma activated water, for example, which gives an environment for things to hang around longer in, basically, including our emotions.
Thank you for that. And there are so many pieces of that I would like to get reactions to. And I think you use different words that mean some of the same things that I mean, for years, PepsiCo has been talking about consumer education, less judgment around food. And I think that's what you're getting. You use very different words than the way Heston talks about it in storytelling. And
good accent, though.
Yeah, great accent, you guys. But could you jump in on that?
A couple of things, actually. First would be that it's ironic that you talk about we're more disconnected than ever when actually we have the ability to be more connected than ever before. And so maybe that's a responsibility. Maybe not using those connections in the right way. I mean, you just look at social media, you can hear the phones going off in the room, right? How old's iPhone? What, 2005, 6 was it? I was 12 years old. It's crazy. So we're more connected than ever before if we want to be. And the second thing is this idea of storytelling. You know, I'm part of a business that manages pretty big brands. The marketing industry prided itself, was born on the back of storytelling, right? That's what we sort of do. And I do think we've lost the art.
Yeah.
And not only do I think we've lost the art, without getting into a marketing conversation, I think we're telling the wrong stories.
Yeah.
We have the ability, I mean, you just think, we're talking the numbers behind the ads you see, the social media platforms you see, it's billions of dollars every year we all spend. If we can reorientate our thinking and tell the right stories to educate people about what they should and shouldn't be doing, that's transformative. So one of the big transitions we're going right now is thinking about how we can drive purpose into our brand storytelling. How can we make sure that the reality is people look to brands. They have done, they always will do. The brands may have changed, the way they look at them may have changed, but we have a responsibility to use those as spotlights for change.
Right.
So the storytelling piece that Heston was talking about is fundamental to society, fundamental to my industry as well as yours. You know, that's I guess one way I start thinking about it.
And I think that is one issue around, for years and for decades now, consumers have adopted a necessary connection between what they eat and their health, personal health. What we don't yet have is a widespread acceptance of a connection between what they eat and the effect on sort of societal health and the planet. And do we think that is a educational need? Is there some sort of marketing campaign that we need around that? I mean, what's it going to take?
You know, I think I'm sorry to.
Yeah, no, please.
I don't think anyone needs to be told there's an issue, right? And it's very easy to talk about this big global issue. It's just pick a picture.
Right.
Right. We've all seen albatross and the birds suffering from consumption of bad materials, right? So, tick, done. We've all know the issue. Turning that into action requires personalization, I think. And it's when you face such a big issue, it's very hard to realize you can make a difference. And until you transition from global big issue I can't touch to something I can touch, must touch, and do something about, I think we're in trouble. So that's the job that I see we need to do. And that requires education, but a different sort of, not telling people what the issue is, providing solutions and encouraging people on how to make a difference to the issue itself.
Matilda, where's the Chinese consumer in this? Is there an increased awareness of the importance of sort of every food choice being a vote?
Unfortunately, I think in some way it's still in the very beginning stage of it. But I think when it comes to food, I think this stays universal that taste, value for money, and convenience are always the three most crucial principles when consumers think about when they want to eat.
Right.
And I think our common challenges here is we cannot taste sustainability. How do you really bring it to that? And oftentimes, when you are bringing organic broccoli in front of a consumer with 5 times more price than the conventionally grown broccoli, they don't understand because it doesn't taste better. And now that we also talk about nutrition, I think nutrition is also really hard for people to understand because consumer trends come and go. 5 years ago, everyone was doing juice detoxing. You see so many cold pressed juice on the shelf. And then now everyone knows that this is actually really, really poor in the nutritional value compared to eating a whole apple. So how do we continue to find different value propositions that can adapt and evolve with the changing consumer dynamics? I think this is going to be a huge thing.
Yeah.
And specifically for China, I think everyone is talking about plant-based protein, and we got so many phone calls like the day after Beyond Meat went IPO, is like, oh, why are we missing? Tencent Ventures call us and say, are we missing something? Is this food tech? What is this? And this is very, very critical for us to also understand that when it comes to China, you need to understand the nuances, right? If you look at the plant-based ingredient intake in a meal for Chinese, we are the highest in the world. So there's no way that in this moment of time that people can start to afford meat consumption, and then you start to tell them, hey, you need to stop eating meat. But so the plant-based protein opportunity, for example, in China will truly lie in the trading up of the plant-based protein. We're already eating so many plants already. So I think the nuances and the local adaptation when you enter a new market, I think that would be very critical for success.
What Matilda just said reminded me of something you shared yesterday, this Dalai Lama quote. I'm going to let you say it instead of repeating it myself.
Yes.
I think it's fitting.
The Dalai Lama had this quote, what surprised him about humans, and he said, man, being mankind, because he sacrifices his health in order to make money. Then he spends all his money to get his health back.
That's very true.
He's scared about the future. He lives in the past. Never stays in the present, and then believes he's never going to die, and then dies never having really lived. And a woman, a palliative care nurse, wrote a book a few years ago on the regrets of the dying. And something to me was so powerful. Imagine you're lying on your deathbed, you've had a good life, and the sun's shining through the window. Your friends and family are seeing you, and you know you're fading away. And your brain atrophies from the outside in, so your sapient cortex goes first, and then when that starts to atrophy, you then start realizing something else. You look over your shoulder and go, "Oh shit!" It's like you've gone down the wrong motorway. By far, the biggest regret of the dying was I wish I lived a life true to myself. So the most intimate relationship, as I said, that any human being has is with their breath and with themselves. Then it's with what they eat. And I believe, yes, I think we have to be looking at the things we put into our body, without a shadow of a doubt. But what we need to put back into the equation, which is so important, which would make a humongous difference, it would make it just by each one of us thinking about ourselves, thinking about, let's call it happiness. We need to eat to be fulfilled and not to be full.
Yeah.
We need to eat less and think about eating more. Now, I don't mean think about eating more food. I mean think about eating more.
You mean mindful eating?
Mindful eating. It's a habit. If we can teach kids this, that there's a classic mindful eating exercise with a raisin. You take a raisin, you look at the raisin, you look at the creases in the raisin, you look where the shines are, where the light and the shadows are, you think about how ripe that raisin is it softer on one end than the other, and you go to pick it up and you imagine what it will feel like.
I've already eaten 80 raisins by this point.
And you roll it between your thumb and forefinger. It will feel different on your thumb to your forefinger. And you feel it softening. And then you look at how the light's changing. And then you start to smell it. Smell from the left and the right nostril. Not quite the same. You put it to your lips. The temperature on the top and bottom lip aren't the same. You start to chew the raisin and you feel this soft, springy texture that gives way to a slight bite, and then the flavor release. You'll get the sweetness. You'll start to notice things in the raisin, roll it around your mouth that you've never noticed before. Time expands and contracts. Everything in this world expands and contracts. Everything. including the universe. Global warming is an effect of expansion and contraction. Very quickly, the Great Oxygenation Event, 2.8 billion years ago, a single cell bacteria came from the bottom of the ocean, rose to the surface. It's called cyanobacteria. And over millions and millions of years, it reacted with sunlight and created photosynthesis. And then that displaced, the whole atmosphere was CO2 then. Everything on Earth was anaerobic. This photosynthesis displaced 21% of the CO2 with oxygen and wiped out life on Earth, apart from cyanobacteria. When the Earth went into a massive ice age. It was called the Great Oxygenation Event. And over billions of years, the atmosphere has been going oxygen, CO2. It's been breathing, expanding, contracting. Global warming is certainly an issue. We certainly contribute to it. We cannot stop it, but that doesn't mean to say we can make a massive difference in this world. If we can educate, if we can storytell, if we can eat mindfully, it's not we are obsessed with objects, money, telephones, houses, degrees, friends on social media. Nothing wrong with that. However, what we need to do is look at our relationship with those objects. If we can do that, we will eat less, eat fulfilled, and think more about what we eat and how we eat.
On that note, I would like to open up to get questions from folks in the room. Do we have mics? We have 2 questions right up front here and here.
Hi there. My question's for Timothy regarding virtual water. And when you put these back into the environment, because they've been exported from countries where they're produced, how well does that go back to where it's come from, in terms of countries which produce these crops lose a lot of their water supply and they never really get it back? So when you put the biomass back, how much of the water actually returns?
Oh, okay. So I didn't catch it at the beginning. So did everybody hear that question? Okay, great. So there's a couple things that contribute to saving water in agriculture. And one of them is biochar, because it acts make a long story short, it's got a lot of surface area. It's like a big giant sponge. And you put it above the root ball, and it actually, instead of water, with the gravity pulling the water past root ball into the soil, it actually holds it above it, so it actually pulls it down like a sponge. But the other major way to actually hold water is build the mycelial network from fungi and microbes. So the biochar itself acts as, like, we call it like a little Weston. It's a little microbe hotel. So you put it in this little surface area thing you put in the soil, and it really rapidly grows this mycelial network. And that's where the Dust Bowl came from. That's what destroyed everything. And this row plow is cutting apart this mycelial network that holds the topsoil down, right? So it basically can save the microbes alone. There's a company called Growing Solutions, or one of our partners and one of our tenants. They're saving 30 to 40% of water just for beneficial microbes, right? They saved a California almond farmer 2 months ago $7,000 on what? Anyone want to guess? Their electric bill for the water pumps. Saving that much water just using beneficial microbes. So a lot of water can be saved.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do we have a mic right here?
Hi, thank you. My question is for Matilda. You mentioned cellular agriculture with respect to lab-grown meat. I think with alternatives, what's really interesting, technology sometimes has unintended consequences. And we've seen that most recently, I think, with vaping, which was sold to everybody as a healthy alternative for the world's billion smokers, but in fact, it's unleashed a whole new generation of nicotine addiction. And a host of new health problems that we're just beginning to understand. With cell-based meat, where do you draw the line, and how do you draw the line with what is then grown in the lab? Will it be okay to eat cell-based elephant meat? Like, will you be able to grow human meat? I'm curious about how you as an investor think about where this might go, what the unintended consequences might be, and in fact, will it actually reduce animal-based meat consumption? Because I think that's after all the thesis. But what if is it possible that it in fact increases the consumption and demand of the real thing?
Right, I think that's a great question. The way that we will see as all the different potential technology solutions, we believe that there's no one silver bullets, right? We need to constantly look for different type of science that will be able to think about, again, in the beginning, how to feed that nearly $10 billion in 20 years. In an ideal world, if we can convert every consumer become a flexitarian or a vegetarian, then we probably don't need any cellular ag science, and no VC should back this technology up for such a long time now and still trying to push the cost to be on par with the conventionally grown meat in the near future. And the way that you talk about the science risk, technology risk, is always going to be in place along with all the other potential sciences. We're also very big on gene editing, for example, because deep down we know that certain species of the plant will not be able to feed. Take pork, for example, by end of this year, nearly half of the pigs will be culled in China. And we haven't found a solution for the next decade. So how will that become a global consequence in the next decade will become a huge issue. So we have to rely on new sciences as a potential solution for better or for worse. And this is also why we also constantly work with the government, especially in China. A lot of innovation should be and is government-led. And so we constantly work carefully to make sure that how we can monitor that potential risks in the future.
Question right here.
So I would just like to thank you, first of all, for your wonderful insights. And my question is a little bit related to the past one. So animal agriculture is the leading cause of species extinction, ocean dead zones, water pollution, habitat destruction, in addition to being responsible for around 91% of the Amazon destruction. And so my question is, can the consumption of livestock and meat, more specifically, ever be sustainable? And can we expect a future that would be vegetarian or vegan, for example?
Heston, do you want to give your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just touching on what I was saying earlier, imagine you are working at your desk on a computer, tapping away, exactly.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
And you're busy, and you think, I'm going to have to work through my lunch break, and you've got your sandwich, whether it was pret-a-manger or in a cardboard packet. And then if you think, right, if I work really, really hard, there's a faster typing, then I could earn myself 15 minutes on that park bench outside. What you do with the way your endocrine system works, because ultimately everything that we're talking about here, we care because we care. Caring is an emotion. Emotion is energy in motion. They're vibrations, resonance. So what happens is you set up an ambition for a 10, 15-minute break. And your hormonal system, these certain hormones are called reward hormones because they're designed to reward you with food. So if you manage to it's not climbing Everest, and then you finish, you imagine, and take 20 seconds, 10 seconds to imagine sitting on that bench. Imagine the weight of your backside on the bench, your feet on the floor. It might be umbrella raining. It might be a bird tweeting or a lawnmower or a bus going by you. Just imagine the sun shining.
Is the sandwich going to contain meat?
And the sandwich contains meat. And you achieve it. And then you do what I described for the mindful raisin. You will eat less. What's happened is you could argue, so this thing of importance of how to eat and being connected and valuing food. If we value meat, if we truly value meat and we eat mindfully, we will consume humongously less quantities of meat. The question is, did we cultivate meat or did meat cultivate us? And microbes, did we cultivate wheat, or did wheat cultivate us? This is quantum. This is basically quantum physics. The microbes that split, they host another living thing that we then get attracted to farm.
That's right.
So it's a superpositioning situation. So rather than continuing to kill, continuing to find ways to replace, continue doing that. But if we can add back into the equation what I was just talking about, the consumption of meat will drastically reduce.
Do any of the other panelists want to address predictions around moving towards a meat-free
No, I'd never thought I'd be on a stage where the same phrase as quantum physics. I feel personally fulfilled.
Superposition quantum physics too. Right? There are ways, if you raise cattle correctly, one of the fastest ways to rebuild grass and soil. So there is a responsible way to do it. Obviously, people are not going to stop eating meat quickly, but there's big pushes. Google's been leading, pushing to put it plant forward in small portions in the back. So there's a lot of shifts changing, but I don't think it's going to move fast enough without alternatives.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, while we're on this topic of sort of predicting the trends for the future, I'd love to go down the line and get your predictions. And I was saying to you before, I usually ask this question with a 50-year horizon, but it feels like there's so much disruption and innovation happening that maybe 25, 30 years, but what is our food system going to look like in 25, 30 years? What is your vision? Simon, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. That's a pretty hard question to answer. The change we're going through right now, even 24 months ago, I don't think we'd have been having the same conversation, right? 12 months ago, we'd have had the same conversation. So I'm not sure I can give you like a one sentence, but I can give you a couple of thoughts. Okay. First is, and maybe it's more wishful thinking than reality, but informed would be one word I'd use. I think if I compare eating habits in the West to the East, it's a functional thing in the West, and it's a way of, whether it's social or an enjoyment piece in the East, right? So when you eat in America, which you do and I do, it's like 5 minutes if I'm lucky, boom, and it's a very functional in-out, sort of process. Whereas in the East, it's a much more pleasurable, enjoyable, social, knowledgeable process and a bigger part of life. So maybe if we can bring the same level of intimacy with food to the West, then we might have a chance of making a difference. And when we think about the big food chains, the big FMCG businesses who happen to be based in the West, I think it's our responsibility, McDonald's, Burger King, these guys, to actually bring that level of intimacy to food and food habits. So I would think that's one thought. And the second, I'd go back to what you were saying at the beginning, which is historically healthier, non-food, non-meat meals have been seen as, even you said, I'll say it now, I'm a vegetarian. I mean, people seem to be a little bit embarrassed by it, It's like, why is society embarrassed? And it's everything that's had healthier angles has been painted in a reduction of, rather than more of.
Yep.
So maybe informed is one, the second would be educating, and let's start talking and painting the picture of the positive side, rather than just, it's got less of this and less of that, would be two thoughts. So.
Love it. Matilda?
People were talking about meat earlier. I think for the crisis perspective, sugar is the #1 killer, maybe for China and Asia right now. I hope that sugar will become the new tobacco in the next 10 years. If you look at the obesity and diabetic situation, China already has surpassed the US 2 years ago, become the world's leading number of both of them. And then what's even more unique is that it only happens starting with the richest city of China. So Shanghai has the highest density of the diabetic population. That means that people are not mindful enough to know how the food choices that they pick will impact their health. They don't know that yet. So I really hope that it will become a tobacco so that people can really reduce further healthcare costs and really can pick the authenticity of the food choices that they can select.
That's a good one. Timothy?
It's scarily fascinating. 20 years?
Yeah.
Decentralized food processing, People much more in touch with kind of millennial values. Where does it come from?
Yeah.
Reduced ingredient decks, and knowing where it's coming from, like the storytelling around that. Obviously, customized foods or supplements that are tuned for your specific gut biome needs. By the way,
Like personalized nutrition?
Absolutely. No, well, that's a whole slippery slope.
Okay.
But basically, just be able to have knowing what your gut needs at the time and what your ailment is, basically, and taking a probiotics and a prebiotic to actually work on that. I think that's going to be really big. And then I see a future, and it's probably not in 20 years. It's probably in the 6-year time frame where, obviously, I have a bias towards transforming food, but I predict there will be a bug on consumer products that actually have a number or some value to it that actually show how much of the inputs, all the inputs it took to make a bag of Doritos or whatever, that was reused, right? Because I think waste is going to be recovery, and it's going to be cool. And it's going to be, people are going to make that decision, that buying decision, based upon how much of that whole life cycle analysis was put into knowing that waste was used in that product.
Waste is going to be cool.
Waste is going to be cool.
All right, Heston, we're going to end with you.
Okay.
I'm ready.
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
No, we have a couple.
You can call it quantum harmonics.
Say it one more time.
Quantum harmonics.
Okay.
So string theory is basically...
Say no more, we got it.
Everything on this planet is in a continual state of motion, even things that we think are dead. A table, if you zoom in small enough, everything is continually vibrating.
Right.
And those vibrations, it's transfer of energy. Emotions are energy in motion. They're a transfer of energy. So if somebody's in a room and sulks, that can spread. Believe me, I know, I've been in this little kitchen for enough years. And you can see it's how from Hitler to Gandhi, from Sadhguru to other people, if you have a belief and you share a belief, you don't have to use language. So you apply resonance, for example, to water, you change the structure of water. And that resonance can come in the way of electromagnetic resonance, changing the pH. You can activate it with various minerals and crystals. Sound, using sound and frequencies to change the structure of the water that we grow our food in, which will change the structure of the soil and the microbes that live in that environment through the whole food network to also ourselves. So sound baths, sound treatments for the food that we grow, cultivate, process, eat, and the water we're 60 to 90% water. Without water, we have no memory. Without water, we have no life. And without water, we have no energy. So structured, activated, resonated water.
That's fascinating.
Bam.
Thank you. You guys, this has been a fascinating panel. I wish we had more time, but sadly we're out. So thank you.
Thank you.